science. And I'm going to try and show you how we can blend in some practical ideas from the classroom into the real kind of virtual world that Intoscience brings to my classroom. So I'm just going to take you through a few of the ideas that I thought would be useful or interesting to see how those two come together. So there are reasons in my classroom for using a blended learning approach. We look at how using some technology and using some hands-on practical science can be interwoven to improve outcomes for young people. So specific reasons. Blended learning is about where learners are, and it's not only where they are now, it's where they're going to be in the future. It's all about the devices, it's about the technology, and it's about making the most of it. Using blended learning offers simulation without risk, or certainly perceived risk. Students often think that some of the science practicals are going to do are going to be a little bit scary, not quite sure what's going to happen. Some of these simulations offer things that you can do certainly beyond the classroom. It allows young people to be adventurous and creative, come up with new ideas and think about how they can stretch their imagination. There are contexts that you just cannot create in a classroom. So if you're building your own solar system or crashing cars into barriers and seeing what speed they do, depending whether it's wet or dry, these are things that you just can't do in an everyday classroom. We look at exploration, experimentation, and they can try it beyond the classroom. So it's very much what they can do in the classroom, but then taking it beyond and enriching it, almost that flipped model, if you like. There is an obvious safety net in that young people can try and they can experiment and they can find out things and make mistakes. That's all part of that creative process. It's certainly self-directed. They're looking at how they can do things in their own time, with their own devices, with their own friends and their own company, and explore those things outside of the classroom with family and friends. And there are certainly opportunities for consolidation, reinforcing what they've learned, making sure that they really understand it, not just on a skimming level, but much, much deeper learning. So I've got a couple of ideas of how we might be able to link forces, a general kind of theme that runs within the Intoscience. We're aiming this generally at Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 3. So if I can just show you the Intoscience platform. And we'll start off with some crash tests. So we've got a car. This program enables us to look at how we might test out the speed of a car, and we can also do a graphing exercise. The first thing we're going to look at is once we've actually, if I just show you from the start here. Now, I know Nicky Thomas earlier was talking about gender stereotyping, and I would hate to reinforce that, but the boys love this. So I've also done some stuff on raising boys' achievement in the classroom, because we know that that gap is huge by the time they get to GCSE. So seeing vehicles crash into walls, it's a boy thing, definitely. Sorry, but if you were going to kind of make a prediction, do you think it's going to hit the wall? So it's going too fast, something like that. Now these results come back to me as a teacher. There we go. And I can then run the test here so that I can actually then pick out a particular speed that the car is running at, and then I can start to graph it. So it takes me through a kind of debrief. Now I can do this either on a big screen, and I can get young people to come up and interact, depends on your class size and what apps you've got available. But this is all fully workable on either Chromebooks, but also on iPads and other Android devices. So what we want to do is check it out in the dry. We'll try a couple of speeds. So we'll start off with 50, and then we'll test it, and what will happen. So we can compare dry and wet. and it'll run through the different speeds and it'll graph it. So it's up to me as the young person then to type in the speed, which was 50 kilometers per hour, and then we're looking at distance. Total stopping distance would have been 11 meters, and then I can run that again and run another test and try, maybe it's just kind of from comparison, take it up to 90 kilometers an hour. So again, put in the data. This time speed was 90k and stopping distance was 36 meters. And just to give you an idea of what that might look like as a graph, I can start to compare instantly dry with wet. And these are very kind of hands-on activities that students can use to engage them, but also to use kind of good scientific principles of collecting data. Okay, what I'm going to do is just take you back to some of the other bits on here, and I'm going to come to this one in a minute. But the idea of forces is simply that if you were in a classroom, how do you kind of blend in those? So if you've got these students working on a flipped model, then you end up with something that they might be doing at home, i.e. using Intoscience. And in the classroom, what you have is a deeper, richer questioning style from these students because they've already seen the stuff that they've been looking at. So I've got two little discs here made of rubber. These are called Magdeburg hemispheres. And if I squash them together, I'm going to push them together. Do me a favour. Could you see if you could just pull those apart? If you give them a little squeeze together, and then try and pull them apart for me. And again, and give them a good squeeze together, and then try and pull them apart. That's taking quite a bit of effort, isn't it? Yep. So can you explain why that might be? Any idea what might be holding those two together? Not sure? So the idea of force is obviously is that you've got something that is, I'm pulling in one direction, you've got an opposite and equal force pressing in the opposite direction. So as I pull this apart, something must be effectively pushing them together. Anybody got any ideas? Correct, it is air pressure. So approximately 1 kilopascal per meter squared, we've got some huge amount of pressure pushing these two together. So when Tom Cruise climbs up a building, he's not using suction, he's using air pressure. Okay, and a Hoover doesn't work by suction, it works by movement of air pressure from one area of high pressure to low pressure. So something else that you might be able to use, just to kind of increase the concept in terms of the awareness of forces, two balloons linked by two bottle tops, they're sealed. Larger balloon, smaller balloon. When I click open these two valves, the air can move in between the two. Anybody like to make a prediction as to what might happen once I might open those valves? Any ideas? So potentially we could have the smaller one gets larger and it balances out. One idea. Could deflate, could be, so it's sealed, so air can't get out. And air pressure, we mentioned earlier, is pushing on both of these equally. So when we let these go, the other possibility is that they stay the same. You've already reached an equilibrium. Possibly, this one could get smaller. So there's three options, or they both burst. But it's a closed system, okay? So let's have a look. Joe's just got a quick prediction. Anybody think this one's going to get bigger? Anybody think this one's going to get smaller? Like it. Anybody think they're going to stay the same? All right, let's have a look. Okay, so here's the first one. That's unclicked. Second one here. By the way, air is heavy, so there is air in there. We talked about this at Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 3, the introduction of the idea of particles and what's actually in there. Here goes to the next one. Isn't that cool? Goes against most kind of human ideas in terms of what might happen. But I can squeeze all of that out there. And it's simply the idea that surface area to volume ratio means that it's easier to put air into a bigger balloon that's already blown up, you know how difficult it is to get that first puff into a balloon to get it blown up. And just to show what air pressure does, if I let this go, it's now an open system, air pressure squashing that. So the idea of forces and unbalanced forces, and then you start talking about what happens with gravity. Now I've got a couple of other things I was going to show you. Some of you may have seen these little film canisters. Those of you that are over the age of 21 might remember these. 35mm film, and to put a bit of water in. These are very simple to do. I have done this with 30 key stage 1, so year 2 pupils. Fully risk assessed, all hand goggles. So what happens is we put, and it was pandemonium. It was absolutely fantastic. So we drop this little Alka-Seltzer tablet in. It produces carbon dioxide. Once we drop it in, click on the lid, turn it upside down, and stand back. So if you can find some of these are really, really cool. But don't ever go too close to it, especially if they don't go off. So let's try another one just to make sure it works. Now, you can do scientific principles with this. You can add in more water. Well, it works. Here's another one. And we might as well do the other one as well. So, very simple. And if you change the amount of water, it's obviously one variable. If you change the amount of tablets, another variable. But you can get kids to do some serious scientific planning. So what Intoscience offers is that you can deepen that understanding of the planning principles. There's another one. And that one will go off there. Try not to point that at my head. It is water. So, essentially, the idea of forces now, everybody likes bubbles. But the idea of understanding what happens to objects based on Newton's principles, his first, second, third laws. This one here, I can see it just bulging out nicely. It's a slightly smaller tablet. But the idea is that you create this idea. So the idea of having some practical science in the classroom that you can start asking some greater questions. Because you've done the background at home, this flipped learning model, students are using this Intoscience to explore, to enrich their understanding, to ask really amazing questions. And once they get hold of this one, this is just super cool. So this is build your own solar system, create your own solar system, one of the activities in Intoscience. And just by holding on to here and creating a little orbit, you create your own planet. And if you don't get the orbit right, you can speed up its orbit. Let's try and get one that's... So the idea of gravity, you see, let's try that way. And you can speed up that. So what you do is you create this solar system. Seems to be like sunlight on the screen, but I'm hoping you can see that. Sun in the middle. Planets revolving around that you've created. You can create the idea of the Goldilocks zone. There are 3 challenges in here where you try and get the right size planet in the right temperature zone to create the optimum conditions for life. Now, unless you've got 2.5 tons of papier-mâché in a lab big enough, like the size of CERN lab in Switzerland, this is the only way you're going to try and have to be able to explore and play around with different sizes of planets and create some kind of ideas of gravity. But the link between what you do with simple demonstrations or more practical activities in a classroom and the enrichment that comes from that by using Intoscience is just fabulous. I've got a couple of other things I'm just going to pick through. There are A number of very simple things for Key Stage 2, just reinforcing either misconceptions or looking at how misconceptions can be unpicked, and then just taking away actually whether things are balanced or unbalanced. So again, the little film canisters works really, really well, just linking in with these. But just ideas, simple ideas of push and pull. We have used some of these activities with Key Stage 4, because there are many young people that haven't quite twigged what's going on with forces and that kind of real basic concept stuff. So trying to get them to just reinforce that and go away and practice it becomes a little bit more independent, and they can do that at their own speed and with their own devices. And just another one. Just back there. So I've got another one here. Let's pick it up. I've got a couple on there that are to do with how you can relate gravity and forces, idea of gravity, but also friction, and kind of developing some ideas and understanding. The idea really that it deepens it. So I just want to try and summarise for you, and then hopefully have a few questions. In summary, this is any idea why this is not? There we go. There we go. Okay, so principally, as a summary, it consolidates what people have learned both in the classroom and outside the classroom. It develops their knowledge, their understanding. It develops a passion for science and takes it beyond that kind of day-to-day classroom stuff. But potentially, with the other parts in there, we'd love you to come and have a look on our stand, just literally 3 rows across on E96, and have a go with some of these. I think there's an iPad on offer as well for some of the competitions. There are mid and end challenges, which allows for really easy assessment. So I can send my students off to go and try some simple kind of mid-plenary stroke style challenges. Good questions, really easy to answer and kind of follow through, sequential learning. And then it comes back in a simple spreadsheet that I can just download and have a look at. In addition to that, the idea is that the activities are very, very intuitive. It's a swipe, it's a click, it's a mess about and play and try and experiment. Certainly allows for independent work, and certainly some of the activities allow for extension beyond that. So if you've got a gifted and talented group or a particular group of students you want to extend, there's a provision for that in there too. Students will naturally explore other activities. It's a kind of game-based platform, so they will go and just find other stuff that they really like, and it's really, really cool. The bit I mentioned was the third degree, which at the end is just this kind of wall of questions that you can fire at and pick up points. And I've got a various kind of little clips of groups of students playing with this, which are just, it just fires them up. They just absolutely love it. They can play in the classroom, or they can play outside the classroom with their friends, and in fact join up with people all across the world. And that certainly stokes up the points for engagement and motivation. So really just to kind of take away from this and have a think about, from my point of view as a classroom teacher, I think this kind of mix of practical science with this kind of virtual world that allows enrichment and engagement is just is an absolute winner, and it's a sensible, productive use of technology. And I think that Intoscience does it. I think they've got this range of kind of built-in assignments, built-in activities that young people are able to use very, very easily. So we're over on E96. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to take questions now. If not, maybe come and have a look, have a go on the iPads, have a look on the screens, and try some Intoscience over there. Anybody got any questions? No? Thank you very much. Thanks very much for listening.